And we're off and running on the Krueger Show Tuesday night. Raj in the house from RSF 49ers. If it happens in 49er land, Raj has posted about it, talked about it on IG. He's a monster, and he's a monster in the making on YouTube as well. And he's back with us on a Tuesday night. Our first appearance since the draft. And, of course, we're brought to you by Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. Check them out in Emeryville and Corte Madera. Go get that brisket and tell them that Larry Krueger sent you. Of course, Damon and Mary, the owners of Pig and a Pickle. Somebody's attacking Raj's camera. Also, thanks to Marin Autoglass, marinautoglass.com, the great Saeed. We appreciate him greatly. And we get it rolling. And Raj, we haven't talked since the draft, so I'll just blindly throw it out there to you. What'd you think?
Yeah, post-draft, I love the draft. It was a fun week. It was tiring. It was a lot, putting all the content. I'm sure you were busy, putting all the videos together, posting all the news and stuff. It was fun. I love the draft just because it gives us so much content to sit here and talk about. And overall, initially, I was like, yeah, it's hard to say what's really going to be out of this draft because, we don't know what these guys are going to do for the 49ers. But after a few days of sitting back and thinking about it, I really like the draft. I think they have some potential starters. They've got some guys that fit their system, there might have been some reaches here and there, but there is always every year. And this is the first year that they drafted without Adam Peters. It definitely seemed like a different vibe than they normally would take. I feel like no 5th-round picks. They traded both of their 5th-round picks, and typically that's the money round, right? So they got rid of those. They still took the running back, which Kyle Shanahan always does. Wide receiver in the 1st round. That was definitely something that caught a lot of people off guard. Offensive line was what everybody was thinking. Or cornerback. I thought it was going to be a cornerback once it got to that point. So it was a little bit of a surprise. But as you peel back the layers and you look at the draft, I love Ricky Pearsall. I think he's going to be a fantastic player for this team. But that means, and we'll talk about this later, there's going to be some wide receiver situations that happen down the line. Maybe not this year, but there's definitely going to be a lot of movement in the wide receiver room. But I love the cornerback and the safety they grabbed. Overall, I gave this about a B, maybe a B+ draft grade. I think that they drafted some really good players that, can become future starters. And even this year, they're going to have some impact. And that's what this draft is all about is next year they have 39 free agents, Larry. They need to start bringing some young talent that could come in and make some impact. And I think they did that. Did they get superstars? Probably not right away, but I think they got some guys that are going to be really exciting to watch. And the undrafted guys, I think they got a couple of players in that lot too that might be future contributors as well. But overall, I really like the draft.
The Pearsall pick, it may have been a little bit of a reach. Who knows? My only question with him is, I think he's real. His 42-inch vertical and his, so he's got great hops and he makes plays in the middle of the field and he's very polished. I would have liked to seen a little bit more college production, but his quarterbacks at Florida were pretty bad. But my whole thing is just about durability. Can this guy take a big hit in the middle of the field in the NFL and keep it rolling? Or is he, if he gets one hit, is he going to be, looking around worried all the time? Because the one thing about the 49ers is, they live in the middle of the field. And Purdy likes to operate in the middle of the field. So, if you can't catch the ball in the middle of the field, or you're, got alligator arms in the middle of the field because you got hit a couple times, I want to see how tough. My question is, how tough is Ricky Pearsall? Because I think he's fast enough, 4.4, and he's 4.4 speed is plenty fast, and he's got good size, and he's got the big vertical. But what can he take a hit? Can he take a hit and hold on?
That's the big question because ultimately, I think he's basically going to replace Deebo Samuel. Let's be honest here. I think the writing on the wall is they tried to shop Deebo. They tried to get offers. They had offers. They just couldn't get the value they wanted. And I think next year, he's not going to be on the team. I think that's the writing on the wall. To me, personally, that's what I see. Because this year's the last year he gets guaranteed money, right? So
you're saying next year you think Deebo's gone. Some people think actually this year he could be gone.
Maybe mid-season there could be a trade. We'll see how it goes, depending on how Pearsall fits into the lineup. You never know. Mid-season, maybe they might shop him durability has been an issue with Deebo, but you made a good point. Is if Pearsall can take those hits over the middle, because they're going to use this guy in those types of packs, slant, the slant and go, bubble screen, jet screen. He can do a lot of that stuff that Deebo did. Maybe he's not as good as Deebo yet. Deebo's a very good player. He's a unicorn, right? He's 101. But this guy lines up and does a lot of Deebo-esque type things. And one of the things that Kyle said about him was he can do it all. That's what he said about Deebo Samuel when he got drafted to the Niners. Is he's a do-it-all wide receiver, and that I feel like fits the theme of Kyle Shanahan, the yak, right, catching over the middle, like you said with Brock Purdy. So I think this is the guy they envision maybe being that next versatile wide receiver. Now, can he stick the landing and take the hits in the NFL? It's hard to say, because in college he was able to. Like, we saw the big catch he made, split the defenders, gets cracked, and he makes the one-handed OBJ. Like, that's a beautiful.
Yeah.
That's
almost like a.
But can he do that in the pros? And he is a smaller frame guy. Deebo's a little bit thicker. Pause. Ricky Purcell's not as thick as Deebo, and if he takes those, it's like me getting hit. If I get hit in the NFL, I'm cracked. I'm crunched. So I do need to see him put some weight on, but his talent is there. He's very physical. And one thing that you said is he played with some really terrible quarterbacks in college, but he's worked his way up from Arizona State through Florida. He's gotten better every year. So I anticipate him to get better in the pros, but it might have been a reach. There were some really good receivers they still could have got on the board, but this is the type of guy the Niners feel fits their system with the motion and the misdirection and things like that. So it fits Kyle's system.
I think he could. It's like one of those things where I wanted other receivers. I'll admit it. I'd rather have had Xavier Legette just because I think he's more bigger and more physical and that kind of thing. But ultimately, this could be a very prolific wide receiver because, Purdy operates in the middle of the field and, I could see this guy being a big third down security valve, chain mover, continuity piece. You know what I mean? I think he seems like the kind of guy that should be able to make some catches in crowded areas, and not a big run after the catch guy, but I just think that kind of the same way that Stafford kept finding Puka in those games against the Niners this year, or that second game, I should say. I guess that was Wentz actually. But Puka is just to me kind of the template for this stop route, all these intermediate route running, really good route running, and I just feel like Pearsall kind of represents that. I'm not saying he's Cooper Kupp, I'm not saying he's Puka Nacua, but I think that's kind of the idea, that kind of unstoppable, mid-range guy. Yeah. Baldy compared him to a bigger, he said he's a bigger, faster Julian Edelman.
Yeah.
That's pretty high praise right there, I'd say. To me, if he's as tough the key to it is toughness. If he's as tough as Julian Edelman, then the Niners got themselves a special player.
Oh, absolutely. And I was just going to say, that was what Baldy said. He looks like a bigger, faster Edelman. And that's a huge compliment. That guy was a dog. You add this guy, throw him in the slot, and like you said, over the middle type passes. If he could catch in traffic and be a professional chain mover, they got a stud. And, another guy who's a professional chain mover for the 49ers who might not be here next year either, Joanne Jennings. So regardless of who's not going to be here next year, I think Pearsall is a guy that Kyle envisions could replace one of them. And, I think there's another receiver a couple of years back the 49ers took that they really thought he was going to be that type of guy, just to do it all, versatile, move the chains. That was Jalen Hurd. And maybe Pearsall is going to be the guy that Kyle wished he could have been, because this guy, he is physical. He can do a lot. His route running, I feel like that's the best part of his game. That, to me, is something that's different than what Kyle typically gets. Because you're right. This is, and one thing I was saying is, without Adam Peters, I feel like this was a different vibe of draft this year. And normally they go defensive tackle first round. I think that had everybody surprised, taking a wide receiver over a defensive tackle. So when I saw this guy, I was like, what is different than normal wide receivers Kyle usually gets? And you're right. I think he does have yak ability, but that's not his strong suit. His strong suit is route running. And what was something in the NFL Super Bowl the 49ers couldn't do? They couldn't separate and beat man coverage because maybe their receivers weren't good enough route runners. So I think Kyle drafted this guy and said, hey, look, maybe he could beat man coverage. Maybe he could move the ball and, move the chains down the field if we have to play someone with pressed corners like the Chiefs did in the Super Bowl. So I think there's a lot of aspects that Kyle saw what he was lacking on this team. And I think Persol, if he could hit his full potential and he could be physical and block and put a little weight on, maybe he's the guy that's going to be able to get open and separate in man coverage. Because in the Super Bowl, those guys could not get open. And I mean, you have two really good receivers, Brandon Aiyuk and Deebo Samuel, and not a single one of them could get open. So maybe that's what.
I mean, it was a testament to Snead and McDuffie. I mean, those guys really are playing at a very high level, and they kind of smothered them. You're right, most of the game. It is interesting, though. You know, I think of the two guys they got in Cowing and Pearsall, and they both seem like kind of slot guys, almost like I wonder at what's the long term future of Juwan Jennings with the Niners. He's such a trusted agent, and so he's such a guy, such a key guy. But these guys kind of play his spot, and he doesn't have his deal's not signed yet for this year. So I don't know what he's restricted. He's not going anywhere. But there are reports out of Pittsburgh that the Steelers still would like to make a spring deal for a big time weapon. And I don't know if it's going to wind up being a 49er or it's going to wind up being T. Higgins. I can't imagine the Bengals would trade them T. Higgins unless they traded back a first round pick. But the talk is from the Pittsburgh side, a guy named Filippone does a radio show out there, Bryant McFadden, that they're still interested in a trade for either Aiyuk or Deebo. And after June 1st, it's a lot less punitive to move Deebo as far as the cap. So there is speculation that if the Niners were going to move Deebo, they'd move him after June 1st. But does it make sense to move Deebo or Aiyuk inside your Super Bowl window, or should you just kind of stay with what you got? I don't know. I mean, it could be debated. Depends, I guess, what the Steelers were willing to give you in return. But what do you think, Raj? I mean, I thought with the draft would come to the end of the wide receiver rumors. But I mean, if you look at it on paper, it does make sense. The 49ers have 11 wide receivers or some ridiculous number of receivers right now. They have wide receiver depth for days, so what would you do here?
Yeah, no, I saw a couple different reports, like Schefter after, he was on Pat McAfee, and he says, yeah, obviously the Niners are trying to work a deal to extend Aiyuk, which I think is going to extend into the training camp, kind of like it usually does. I know Lynch has said he wants to get this deal done faster than he normally does. So I think they're trying to work on it. They're trying to get it figured out. And one thing was also said was, yeah, the Niners have received calls of there's always a possibility of a trade. So yeah, there's always a possibility, but I think the door is closed right now on that, unless the offer is too good to be true. But I think honestly, after the draft, if you couldn't get anything during the draft, which is prime time for a trade, I don't think it's going to materialize anytime soon, unless midseason comes and then someone's like, "Hey man, we got it. Look, let's take Deebo off your hands. You got these receivers that are really turning up." Maybe down the line, but I still think the Niners make a run at it with all their big time guys. And I know they have a lot of receivers on their team, but a lot of guys are people that could be practice squad guys, people that might not make the roster. Like, let's be honest, Danny Gray is a make or break off season for him. Like Trent Taylor, maybe a return man. I'm not expecting a world beater from Trent Taylor. I don't know if he's going to make the roster. Chris Conley, cool story in the playoffs, but no, I mean, he's a 9-year vet. I'm not expecting much out of him. Ronnie Bell, second year in the league. I can't expect him to have a huge second year break. I'm not going to hype him up like that. I mean, you got realistically Deebo, Brandon Aiyuk. Deebo gets hurt a couple times a year. You need somebody to come in when he gets hurt. Juwan Jennings, if he has a season like he could possibly have after that playoff run, he might price himself out. So you got Cowing and Pearsall, who are two guys that I think will make this roster and really develop well. So yes, you have 11 right now. It's a 90-man roster, but I think ultimately they'll have 5, maybe 6 out of that room. And the wide receiver competition is going to be great in training camp. I don't think the Niners will move anybody. I think, again, Rappaport and Schefter are both saying, hey, look, there was a time, there was a place, it didn't happen. I'm sure they'll still take reports, or calls, but ultimately I see them getting a deal done with Aiyuk. And I think next year, because there was a piece by Nick Wagner on ESPN, and he says 2025 is probably the year where receiver is going to be part of it, and that's probably Deebo. Because again, his guaranteed money is done after this year. They can move next year, and they don't have to take a big role for him. Like if he has a pretty good year, they might be able to fetch a second round pick from next year because Stephon Diggs, right? A little bit older, but he had very good years of production. He got a second round pick netted from him. So ultimately, I think the Niners stick with who they have.
I'll say this: who they have is a lot. I mean, they have a ton of wide receivers. I mean, Deebo, Aiyuk, Juwan Jennings. Then you add Pearsall, Jacob Cowing. We haven't even talked about Cowing. In my opinion, Cowing is, I think, my favorite pick that they made. Just because it's real speed. It's a guy who has ball skills and speed. What's so dangerous about Tyreek Hill? Well, he's got unbelievable speed, but he also has good ball skills, so he can catch the ball, and he's kind of durable and thick. Cowing is small, but he's not weak. He's a strong player, and he runs really good, precise routes for a guy who runs to a terrific 40 times. So I think that's he's a polished receiver who, last 2 games caught 15 balls for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns. You know what I mean? He's coming on. I think that was a real phenomenal pick. To me, that was my favorite pick. My least favorite was the offensive lineman from USC in round 6. I thought that was, seemingly that guy could have been an undrafted free agent probably. And they could have gone with this. I just thought there were a number of better players on the board. We'll see what he winds up being, but Kingston. But what do you think, Raj? Give me your favorite and least favorite picks.
Yeah, good question there. And to follow up real quick on Cowing, yeah, I was blown away. I was so happy they got that guy because I didn't. I mean, you see him pick a receiver in the first round, and you're like, oh, there's no way they get another receiver. And they get a guy like Cowing, who I think that was a steal. I remember they brought him in a couple of weeks ago on a top 30 visit, and I started looking him up. I think we did a show, and like that day they had done a top 30 visit, and I remember looking into him. I was like, okay, I like this guy. He's quick. The only knock on him was his hands, but I think he could hit the jug machine and improve. This guy could definitely be a big time player for the 49ers. But my favorite pick of them all was second round pick Renardo Green, the cornerback out of Florida State. Oh man, this guy is a absolute junkyard dog. He's physical. He's gonna hit you in your mouth and keep coming. He locked down Malik Neighbors, the number 6 pick in LSU last year when they played. I love everything about this guy. And we talk about little paradigm shift in the drafts this year. They took a cornerback in the second round. That's unheard of for John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan. It's a little different, right? They don't usually take cornerbacks that high. And I was like, oh, okay, I like this.
Kuiper said it. Kuiper called it a 2-round reach. Most of the draft guides had him in the 4th or 5th round, but I loved him. I thought, I watched a lot of him early. I thought, you can see the swagger, the confidence, the body control. He's in college, he was a little too aggressive. So there's too many penalties there. But in the pros, I think this guy is going to be, a really solid cover guy who also can play a little free safety.
Oh, absolutely. And that's why I like him. He's so versatile. And they've been missing that versatility when Jimmy Ward left. That's kind of what I saw in this guy. Like, okay, he could play outside. He could play inside. He could play safety if you need him to in a pinch. And injuries happen. And, one person that this Niner team has been, really missing since he left, K'Wan Williams. They've been dying for a slot corner for years. And I love Demo. I love Mooney Ward. Those 2 guys are solid. They're set in stone. But now you got a guy that can play in the slot, or he can play outside. You can move Diamador Lenore into the slot. I absolutely love the pick. And again, he's very physical. Now, maybe too physical, because in the NFL, they might call some of the stuff he did in college a penalty. So he's got to refine it a little bit. But man, this guy, press cover corner, I love it, because in the NFL with the receivers they have now, if you jam them, get inside their head, they're going to be so sick to their stomach. So I love this pick. I think he's going to be a solid player for the 49ers. He could be a starter. Again, nickel spot's been up in the air, Larry. And if he could come into training camp and show, I'm your nickel, boom, he's a starter right away. So I love that pick. Least favorite pick, same as you. I did not like the offensive lineman out of USC, Kingsley. But, I mean, at that point, 6th-round pick, you're not getting a world beater. And they've been, they needed depth. So at least this guy could come in and at least compete for a position. Maybe he can beat out Jalen Moore or one of the other, Nick Zakel, somebody like that. But I wasn't too fond of the pick. That was like probably like, okay, yeah, they just needed to draft a guy. They needed O line. Let's take this guy. We'll see if he can pan out. He is versatile a little bit, so maybe that's why they liked him. I liked the undrafted center they got from Michigan, Drake Nugent, more than I like this guy. I actually love Nugent. I think he's going to be Jake Brendel's replacement next year when this guy gets up to speed. But yeah.
Nugent's interesting. I used to do the Stanford pregame. He was down there on the farm playing for Stanford, and they transferred to Michigan. He's got to work on speed. I mean, he's a smart guy, and there's a lot of things he does well, but he needs to work on speed in that Michigan game. I mean, against Ohio State, Michigan. Michael Hall just wrecked him. He was so much faster than Nugent that Nugent had his hands full all day. Now that's Michael Hall, and he's one of the best players in college football. But still, I'll be eager to see what Nugent does in camp, because he's been at two different programs, a lot of experience, smart player for sure. And we'll see. They what did you think of the number one offensive lineman they drafted, Pooney? I mean, do you think this guy is a guy that could compete with Burford? And to me, that's what I'm looking for, is like, can Pooney be good enough where he competes with Burford and Feliciano for that right guard starting spot? And that would be if you want to say, hey, what would be a great development is if Pooney was somehow, able to start at right guard right away. That would be a nice shot in the arm, because he looks really powerful and athletic and fast, and he looks like a really good prospect.
Yeah, I like the pick. I think he's very versatile. Again, he said he can play his
Anywhere.
Post-draft video. He said, I could play anywhere. I could play center, tackle, guard, shoot me in there. I'm ready to win the Super Bowl. So I like that he's versatile, because we need O-line help. So this guy could be a jack of all trades, master of none, kind of like a Dan Brunskill type guy. If you need somebody in a pinch, you can throw him on there. But yeah, I think initially they're going to try him in an interior line, see if he can make it as a starting guy, maybe right guard, like you said. Feliciano and Burford splitting right now, probably going to be fighting for that spot. Maybe this guy sneaks up. But you also got to realize next year, Aaron Banks, free agent. If he has another season like last year, he might price himself out of there as well, because Brock Purdy's contract's coming up next year. You got Brock Purdy, Brandon Aiyuk's going to hit the books when they extend him. So, yeah, maybe it's a guy that can replace Aaron Banks if he doesn't come back. Although I feel like they'll try their best to extend Banks and bring him back. But this guy could play anywhere. If you need him at left, if you need him at right. I think he's more suited to play left, so maybe it's a guy that could kind of sneak and take his spot if needed. But I think initially, yeah, the goal is to maybe become a really good starter, because Feliciano, he's played 10 years. He might be out of there next year as well. He's said, I think, on his Instagram, last ride, this is my last year. So, yeah, I think he can take either one of those spots if he can develop and hit his stride. I saw his tape. Looks pretty powerful. Looks like a very pretty good prospect. Third round, that's not bad. I think everybody was upset, though, because I think they wanted to address the lineman earlier. But in the third round, I don't think there was too many better options than this guy. I like the pick. I mean, definitely a guy that can come in and earn a spot down the line.
Of course, Raj in the house. It's the Krug Show, and we are brought to you by Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. As I said, check them out in Emeryville and Corte Madera. We're also brought to you by Sharp Corner Sports Cards and Collectibles. Check them out in Monterey. Give Anthony Catania a call. He's at 831-521-5264. They're at 205 Cypress Avenue for all your sports cards and collectible needs. And thanks to Anthony for being a sponsor of the Krug Show. All right, let's talk a little bit. I mean, there's some, so many topics to get into. The wide receiver thing to me is really interesting, just from the standpoint of, you've got Deebo, Aiyuk, and JJ, and then you have Pearsall, and I think Cowing is a terrific little player. I mean, I can't wait to see him in a 49er uniform, because he gives them real speed, but also route running ability. So there's 5 right there. That could be your wide receiver room, but then you still have Danny Gray, Ronnie Bell, Chris Conley, Tay Martin, Tariq Owens will be in camp, Trent Taylor. I mean, that's six, there's going to be 6 or 7 wide receivers that they say goodbye to. If they go with, Deebo, most teams go with 5. You might
Yeah.
go with 6. So that to me is going to be really interesting. Who stays, who goes, who gets cut. But the wide receiver core if that's their wide receiver core, I really think Cowing and Pearsall, you might be able to come in and contribute right away. So that will take a little bit of if they had more, if they're using more of their receivers, because they really just use their starters for the most part. You didn't see a lot of Conley and Bell and Gray and Tay Martin never got active, and they didn't have Trent Taylor last year. But you know what I'm saying? They've got 5 guys right there that they could play on a regular basis, and I think that could make them deeper and maybe is kind of the weapons they need. I love the fact that they gave Purdy a middle of the field safety valve, and I love the fact that they also gave they got a speedster that can create space and dynamic plays, and I could see Purdy hooking up with Cowing and Pearsall quite a bit. So I actually like those wide receiver additions in a field that was deep with wide receivers. I kind of like the way they handicapped it. They got a guy with a ton of ball skills, and then they also got an explosive weapon as well. All right, let's talk a little bit though about as far as going forward. One of the stories today that I thought was kind of interesting that I wanted to ask about was Jamal Adams. There's a lot of talk that the Niners are interested in Adams, and I don't know if the talk's legitimate to Seattle Times. Anytime you hear a Seahawk player tied to the Niners, the first thing I always think is, oh, this is a ploy to get the Seahawks to budge, because the last thing they want to see is their players play on the 49ers. But what do you think, Jamal Adams? You think there's something there? He's a safety, or is he? He could be a weak side backer. He could be a replacement for Greenlaw. He could be, he's only 28. He's unique in that he's not a great coverage safety. But what do you think of Adams on the Niners?
Yeah, I saw that. I was just going to bring up the reporter that brought. So, yeah, I think part of it is a little bit of, I know the Seattle Seahawks, according to the report, they still have interest. They want to bring him back, but also the 49ers now, apparently they've been in close, keeping an eye on the guy or whatnot. And I think that might be some pressure on the Seahawks to say, oh, if we really want him, we got to make a move. So yeah, there's probably some leverage here and there going on. But honestly, initially I was like, oh God, not Blitz Boy, not Jamal Adams. He's a Seahawk. It's like a couple years back when the Niners went and, they got Richard Sherman and he's the enemy. You hate the Seahawks. But if we really think about it, the 49ers have been desperate for a veteran safety all offseason. We've talked about it. Justin Simmons was rumored. Isaiah Blackman, he resigned with the Colts. Unfortunately, the Niners couldn't promise them a starting spot. They need a guy, a veteran, because we don't know just how far along Hufanga is going to be. Will he return to his role? You need insurance in case he doesn't come back to speed or he gets hurt. You need a guy that could come in. He's a veteran. You don't need to teach him. One guy we drafted, Malik Mustafa, I loved it. A guy we didn't mention yet. I absolutely love that guy, but he's a rookie. Can you expect him to step in right away and take a big role? Probably not right away. So yeah, I don't hate the idea of actually bringing in Jamal Adams. He could play a hybrid role, linebacker / safety type mix. He can be a guy on blitz packages. So do I hate the idea of it? Absolutely not. I think they've been looking for a veteran safety. I think he's a cheaper option than someone like Justin Simmons, and he probably doesn't necessarily need to start if he comes to the Niners, which I feel like the 49ers are looking for a veteran that doesn't need to start if he comes onto the team and is just happy to be there as a veteran mentor, because they had Tashawn Gibson, but he hasn't re-signed with the team. A lot of people have said he might retire, which he almost did last year. So I think it makes sense. Now I know Niner fans are going to say, no, not Jamal, not Blitz Boy. But if you really think about the business and everything of it, it makes sense. I don't hate the idea.
Well, if you just look at the numbers, every year that goes by in the NFL, the higher and higher percentage of the total sacks are going to smaller and smaller players every year. It used to be defensive tackles and defensive ends sack the quarterback, and nobody else did. Now you're seeing all kinds of dogs, all kinds of blitzes, all kinds of linebacker blitzes, and you're basically, you're seeing smaller guys get to the quarterback now. They're blitzing corners off the edges, safeties, and to me, that's what Jamal Adams is. I mean, that's what he's best at. He's best at attacking the quarterback instinctively, hovering near the line of scrimmage. He's a blitzer. To me, the best thing he does is rush the passer.
Yeah.
But he's good at that. He is really a tough guy. If the money was right, he's interesting. He's not gonna help you in coverage as a safety, but I wonder if they would look at him as a linebacker, and then maybe as a linebacker, maybe his coverage might be considered better. I don't know. It's to me, it would be interesting to see a physical, hard hitting, passionate player on your defense, especially since you do have some young players. That would be he'd be an interesting piece because in a lot of ways, I think he's one of the more overrated players.
Oh yeah.
I mean, Seattle traded multiple number ones to get this guy, and he makes but it's not like he has no value. He does attack the quarterback. He is good as a blitzer. He is good. He's not great in covering the tight end, but he's good going forward. He's not good going backward.
Yeah, he's horrible in coverage. Like, he's a great blitzer. Again, if you use him in blitz packages, you throw him as like a hybrid linebacker. I can see it working. And it's a veteran. Again, they've been looking for a veteran safety that could come in and help the team. I don't hate it. Nick Sorensen, he's coached in the Seattle system, so he might know the system that Sorensen's going to be implementing as DC. So it makes sense in that aspect. But I'll tell you what, if we have to rely on him in coverage, Larry, it's not going to look pretty. I don't know if you remember. There was the play that stuck out to me last year. I remember. So Niners, Seattle, he comes up. He starts flexing on Deebo because he makes a big tackle on him. He comes up. He flexed on him. Literally, the 2 minutes after he flexed, Brock Purdy, the literal next play, pumps it. Jamal Adams in coverage. He gets smoked. Deebo over the top, touchdown, like deep pass. And I was just like, oh, I can't believe Jamal flexed. Literally makes a tackle, flexes, and then gets dotted up by Purdy and Deebo. I was like, this man better never flex again. So if we have to rely on him in coverage, it's not pretty, Larry.
Seriously. But at the same time, I mean, we're talking about a guy who's a 3-time Pro Bowler and I think a 1-time All-Pro. So he's got some talent, and it's just a matter of is he a scheme fit? Is he a budget fit? I don't know. I mean, he's got a unique skill set. I mean, he does certain things exceptionally well, and he has a presence on the football field, and he makes some big plays. But in coverage, and it's becoming increasingly a coverage game, he's lacking as a safety. So maybe the thought is to play him at linebacker. I mean, he's definitely in that kind of tweener size range where he could probably play linebacker if they wanted him to. What did you think of the backfield? I mean, the Niners have McCaffrey, Mason, and Mitchell, and Juice, and they added Patrick Taylor before the draft, and yet they still go into the draft and they get Isaac Guerendo from Louisville, who's just a ridiculous size speed monster. He's 225 pounds or whatever, and he runs 4.31 or something. He was the guy's unbelievably big and fast. And then you have Cody Schrader, who was the first team All SEC running back for the Missouri Tigers. He was terrific this year. I mean, in the best conference in America against the best defensive athletes in the country, he was amazing. So what do you make of the backfield? I mean, I actually think Schrader is a running back, but I think Guerendo might be like a futuristic fullback. Could you imagine how awesome it would be if you could use this guy out of the flat and throw it to him like a Juice, use him as a fullback in certain formations and spread the field and make teams cover a fullback with 4.3 speed? I mean, that would be interesting.
Yeah. I saw your take. I saw that on draft day. I saw you say that, and I was like, "Oh, that's interesting." But how good of a blocker is he? Is my question. Is because if you're going to be a fullback, especially for Kyle Shanahan, and if you're going to be replacing Juice, if whoever the heir apparent to Juice is, better be a damn good blocker, Larry. That's what I'm saying. But
It's funny you should say that.
oh,
Look at that. Look at that. We might have to share the screen here. Oh, wait, no,
let's check.
We'll have to wait a second. Hold on.
But in general, though, I'll get to it. But yeah, let me have you pull up the screen. I got my take on Durando on the running back situation.
Okay, here is a tweet that I had from earlier today.
Okay.
And here's Garendo.
Ooh.
And he's in the backfield next to the quarterback and just pancakes.
Okay, look at that. Ooh, okay.
Now, look at that guy. You know, this is a pretty thick. This is a pretty thick, fast guy too. I mean, he's
okay. There's some potential to work with there, Larry. There's a potential.
Do you see that? I mean, he's not 240 like Juice, but he at 220, he's still giving.
He's got some power for 220, but yeah, Juice.
He just levels the defensive end there.
It's true. He did. That was a nice play. Well, let's pump the brakes. Although I will say I was a fan.
But I mean, what is he? Is he a halfback or a fullback? Because he really never was a full-time running back for anybody. He had a monster bowl game against USC, but he really wasn't a full-time running back at any point in college football. So he's only has 300-yard games in his career. Yeah. He only has like 17 games ever he's only had 17 touches once in his entire career.
He's still very raw, yeah. But I'll tell you what, 4.33 40. When I saw that, I was like, okay, this guy's a home run hitter. And this is the thing. The 49ers, yes, they have Mason. Okay. Yes, they have Mitchell. But Mitchell, he's good for 7 games missed. He's going to get hurt. I think this is basically Kyle Shanahan saying, hey, Elijah Mitchell, you better be healthy for training camp or your days are over, my guy. They're not getting anything from him. He has no value, no trade value, because he's unfortunately always injured. So this, to me, is Kyle saying, if this guy pans out, he's our replacement for Elijah Mitchell. And then it makes Jordan Mason expendable, which 49ers always trade running backs. They always make these moves. Kyle Shanahan could develop a running back in his sleep. And it's funny that you say they got Corey Schrader, bless you, the undrafted guy. The 49ers love undrafted running backs. Look at the history of Kyle Shanahan. I mean, Matt Breida, Raheem Mostert, et cetera, et cetera. This guy, Corey Schrader, I couldn't believe he went undrafted. This guy is an absolute dog. In Kyle Shanahan's system, he could become someone special. If they didn't have CMC, I could see Corey Schrader being like running back 1 for the 49ers, but CMC's there. So they got some guys that make some other guys on their team, like Mason and Mitchell, expendable. So they better learn some overseas language because they may not be playing on the Niners for too long. But I do love Garendo, 4.3 speed. You give CMC a couple of plays off to rest. You get the hole open behind Trent Williams. Garendo's rolling. He's rolling for yards. I'm telling you, 4.3 speed, so home run threat. That's basically Elijah Mitchell's replacement. Love that guy. And they gave up 2 fifth-round picks to get him. That's unheard of for the 49ers. So I think Kyle likes this guy.
They got aggressive in the middle rounds. They traded 2 5s for a 4 and took Garendo in the middle of that round. And, you know, it's interesting. I mean, he's big and fast and explosive. I'll say this, man, Cody Schrader is a really good player. And I saw him at Missouri. He's got good size, good speed, knows how to run. Had his best games against the best teams. I mean, he was great against Georgia. He was great against Ohio State. I mean, he had 200 plus yards against Arkansas, 200 plus yards against Tennessee. I mean, in the SEC. I mean, for this guy to not, I mean, you're the best running back in the SEC this year, and it's the best conference, and you don't get drafted.
It's crazy to me. He's so good. And one thing, too, with the 49ers, I think a lot of the guys they drafted, they added speed. I think Kyle Shanahan's realizing I need to add more speed on this team because they always have good yak guys, like good powerful guys, like finesse guys. They just haven't had enough speed on their roster. Look at the Miami Dolphins. I think it's an adaptation of the 49ers, offensive scheme, but with more speed. And I think Kyle said, let me sprinkle a little bit more speed on this team. But you also have to understand, too, the return game is going to be different this year with the kick returns and everything. So I feel like the 49ers are also preparing for that. They got Cowling, like you said, and Ricky Pearsall and all these receivers. Like you mentioned, there's a plethora of receivers. You got a plethora of running backs. they're adding guys that they're going to really try to tinker with. I feel like not only in the offense to give Purdy more options, but to help with the return game because I feel like that's going to be a big difference in the league this year. So I think the Niners are making sure they're prepared for a lot of situations.
I mean, I love the fact they've added some speed and they're a little bit more dynamic because
Mm-hmm.
the quick scoring ability and some of the mismatch ability. And the four guys that they added, Pearsall and Cowing at receiver, and then the running back Schrader and Garendo. I mean, and Cowing. I mean, it's such speed. I mean, the speed and big playability is really, really nice to watch. Couple last things. Who else did you like in the draft as far as who do you think did well?
Oh man, in the league, not just the Niners. There were some teams that drafted well. I think the Cardinals had a fantastic draft. The Cardinals, man, they really came to play. I think the NFC West in general did a good job. I think the Rams, they drafted two really good defensive linemen, and then they got our boy Blake Corum. I mean, that's going to be a problem to deal with the NFC West. And they lost Aaron Donald to retirement, so they added two really fantastic defensive linemen. Those two teams in the NFC West, I think, had a really solid draft. I know everybody's talking about how the Detroit Lions, I feel like, had a masterclass draft. I think they did really well. There was a lot of teams. I think the Eagles got a lot of headlines because they made so many trades, but honestly, they also had a pretty good draft. Howie's very aggressive. I think he made some big moves. Cooper DeJean onto that team on the second round was huge for them. But I think the Lions, man, had a view. They had a great draft, man. They were aggressive. They added some stars on the, in the secondary. That was an issue for them last year, was secondary, and they really made that a point of emphasis. So those teams, they saw their glaring weaknesses and they attacked it. So those teams stuck out to me. I know there was a couple of other teams, and then the freaking Chiefs, man, they went and got. They're probably next Tyreek Hill. They went and got Xavier Worthy. How crazy are you if you're the Buffalo Bills? You gift wrap your enemy a speed demon like Xavier Worthy for Patrick Mahomes. I was shook, Larry. I was like, I can't believe the Bills let them do this. I like Keon Clark, but you just let your enemy have this crazy weapon. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, you mean Keon Coleman
Yeah,
for
yeah,
Buffalo?
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's all about how you feel about it. I mean, if you have a high ranking on Worthy's a go pattern guy on the sideline for sure. He's got unbelievable speed, but I don't see him running like the full tree and all the short stuff. And to me, he seems fragile. Maybe I'm wrong, but durability to me is a major part of it. And he just seems like a just an awesome speed demon, but I kind of wonder in the middle. I mean, he was 164 pounds or whatever when he ran that 4.21. So I mean, there aren't too many receivers in the NFL running around 164 pounds. I'll tell you that. So
Right.
I kind of wonder if he's exactly how it's going to work out for him, but. I like the A.D. Mitchell from Texas more than Worthy, though I liked Worthy. I just, I watched all of his, I watched Texas 5 times this year, but then I've watched basically all of how they used him and his catches, and it's a lot of go patterns down the field.
Yeah, but for Mahomes, that's all
I
he
mean, it
just.
creates space for for their underneath stuff,
Yeah,
so maybe that works for them. But
and they got
I don't
Hollywood
think.
Brown, two speed. They get all I'm
Yeah,
saying is
him and Hollywood Brown are going to run off the coverage for
they're going to
sure.
be running deep. You can't. It's a track record. And then if you try to double that, Travis Kelsey, the highest paid tight end, is going to be sitting right up. So for the Chiefs, it was the perfect pick for them. I mean, yeah, I don't think was even the best receiver. I watched the combine. And I was like, okay, he's just an overhyped guy. But situation matters in the NFL, and when you get drafted to the right team, it's the right fit, you're going to become a star. And if you get drafted to the wrong team, you're not going to be a star. So I feel like for the Chiefs, that was a home run pick for them. I couldn't believe it, man. But yeah, no, those are the teams I felt did good. I felt Adam Peters, his first job
Yeah,
as
he
a
had a good.
GM, he did a pretty good job. He was all over the place this offseason, so he did good.
He did. He had a number of good pickups, and they even got some. They've also got Rosemi Jack Saint,
Yeah,
Marcus Rosemi Jack Saint, as an undrafted guy after the draft. So Peters was hustling this week for sure.
yeah.
I like what the Steelers did. I mean,
Okay.
to me, they got the best offensive tackle in Fatanu. They got
Yeah.
the best center in Frazier, and then they got the best, most underrated guard, I thought, in Mason McCormick. After round one, of course, I'm not including the Lathams and all those guys, but I mean, they really did get three terrific offensive linemen. I mean, and they got Peyton Wilson and they got Roman Wilson. I mean, I thought the Steelers did a nice job.
Yeah, they had a good draft haul. I think that's fantastic. They drafted a great offensive line. I wish the 49ers would have came
Yeah,
away with the
seriously.
offensive line like that. Yeah, no, definitely they had a Mike Tomlin knows ball. Mike Tomlin's a smart coach. So yeah, he put together a good draft. Yeah. I think
Yeah.
the worst draft, I don't know if it's the worst. It just was the craziest draft. Obviously I think the big talk of day one was Michael Penix getting drafted by the Falcons after, they paid all that money and they got Kirk Cousins. I get the vision. It's like Aaron Rodgers when they took Jordan Love, you get this guy.
Only thing is he's 24 and
I
they're
know.
talking about having him wait for 3 or 4 years. I mean, then he'd be what, 27, 28.
That's
That
old in quarterback.
seems like it's not going to happen. But
Although
puts a lot of
Kirk
pressure
Cousins,
on Cousins.
yeah, it's going to put a big giant. He's going to be looking over his shoulders, Larry,
Yeah, he
and
is.
he's coming off a major injury, so some pressure on Kirky boy.
No question. No question. And we'll see what, we'll see. I personally think Penix is going to wind up playing, Cousins is 5.
Yeah,
He's probably going to take some hits, and then all of a sudden here comes Penix. And now I'm a big Penix fan. I'm a believer that Penix is the best in this class. So we'll see. We'll see in time. As far as the other spots, so you got McCarthy in Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
You got Drake May in New England.
Mm-hmm.
You got Jaden Daniels in Washington, and Caleb in Chicago. Bo Nix in Denver.
Oof.
What do you think? And then Penix in Atlanta. Who's in the best spot of those quarterbacks?
I mean, if you look at the draft, Caleb Williams as a number one pick, this is probably the best situation any number one pick has walked into. Like they put together a great draft class for him. They've got a lot of weapons. Now the O-line may be a little lacking. I think they could definitely beef up that O-line. But in terms of weapons for a number one pick, it's one of the best situations a number one pick could kind of walk into. I'm not a big Caleb guy, but I feel like he is in a very good situation. The fans have embraced him. Like they are ready for this guy to just be a franchise quarterback. They've never had a franchise quarterback. Every quarterback they drafted has just not lived up to the hype. I feel Fields was teetering, but they didn't really build around him enough. And again, I think a fresh start for him in Pittsburgh is good for him. But I think Caleb walks into the best situation. I'm not a big Drake May guy. They even drafted another quarterback a couple rounds later. So I don't know about Drake. Chase Daniels, he has a good GM. I like Adam Peters. I think he's put together a good team and foundation for Daniels. But I don't know. I think Penix might also be a surprise just because Falcons have a pretty solid team around him. And like we said, if Kirk Cousins re-aggravates his injury, Michael Penix to the moon, baby. And I know that's your boy. Like, that's your guy.
Absolutely is. He's one of my guys, but I'll tell you who another one of my guys is. Tanner Mordecai.
Niners got him.
Tanner Mordecai. Raj, have you done the deep dive and watched Tanner Mordecai at all?
I've looked at him. I saw a tweet by Crocky, and he says, "I've never been more hyped about an undrafted quarterback until Larry Krueger talked to me about, like, I don't know what you have told these folks, but I need you to sell me right now. Sell me on Tanner Mordecai, Larry. Go."
Okay, first of all, I mean, I always go with my first impression. My first impression was, I know the name and I watched him a bunch, but never really focused on him. And I know he's been around the block and transferred a couple times. But I also thought I just didn't think. I thought of college level quarterback. But when you take a closer look, Raj,
Mm.
this guy is really pretty damn good. And he started at Oklahoma, he went to TCU, and then he went to Wisconsin. He went 3 years at Oklahoma, 2 years at TCU, and 1 year at Wisconsin.
Wow.
And at Oklahoma, he loses he's the backup to Kyler Murray 1 year. The next year he loses out to Jalen Hurts. And the next year he shared the job with Spencer Rattler in 2020.
Wow.
But he only wound up playing in 12 games in 3 years at Oklahoma because they were, those are all NFL quarterbacks basically. Yeah. So then he goes to SMU and transfers, and he makes Rashee Rice a major star. He had 1,000 yards catching balls from Mordecai, and the guy first start with SMU, he throws 7 touchdowns against Abilene Christian. He threw for 9 touchdowns against Houston in 2022. So so the guy has production. I went to look at him as a high school player. He's born in Waco, Texas.
Wow.
He went to Midway High School in Waco, and he was a 4-star high school recruit.
Woo.
So they thought he was really, really good coming out of high school. And he gets the ball. If you watch him, he gets the ball out quickly. He completes about 67% of his passes. But what makes him special when you look at it's the story. This kid breaks his right hand against Iowa. And like 4 weeks later, he's playing in the bowl game against LSU, the ReliaQuest Bowl, throwing for 378 yards and 3 touchdowns and no picks. He's got a strong arm. Some people say he's got a cannon. I don't know if he's got a cannon, but he's definitely got a strong arm. And despite the fact he, was decent at Wisconsin, and looked good in the bowl game, he wasn't invited to the combine. So he didn't go to the combine. But when you look at this kid as a prospect, what stands out, good size. I mean, he's basically Brock Purdy size. He's like 6'1", 6'2", about 215, 220 pounds. 1.63 10-yard split. So it's not the 1.54 that Purdy has, but he's still pretty quick. But he runs 4.46 in the 40.
Wow.
And when you watch him play, he has this confidence in the pocket because he knows he can run at any time, and he's totally tough, and he's really willing to run in the middle of the field.
Wow.
So he's he's an authentic leader. I mean, you can tell too. This guy's smart. I watched some of the interviews he did. He's super smart, calm, very, very in control. Gets the ball out quickly, has 4.4 speed, 6'2", 215, 36-inch vert. So he's a great athlete, really. And if you watch him, he can operate. He plays with confidence. He's pretty accurate, tough guy, plays hurt, fiery competitor type. And then if you look at this year, Wisconsin, only 9 touchdowns, 4 picks. But the 2 previous years, 32 touchdowns, 10 picks, 39 touchdowns, 12 picks.
Oh, man.
So he's had 2 full college seasons where he's, 3-to-1 ratio, touchdowns to interceptions, and some big numbers. So I don't know. I mean, he's not small. He's pretty smart. He's really fast. And he runs like down the middle of the field. I mean, he's not afraid to run in the middle of the field, and he's athletic. But he also has kind of a hose. So, I mean, it's amazing. I mean, I don't know where they keep scouting these guys, but I'm not saying this guy's Brock Purdy, and I'm not. But I'll say this. If it comes down to Tanner Mordecai, is he something or is he nothing? I'm voting for he's something.
Okay. You got me sold. I'm ready to put him on this roster, 53-man him. Brandon Allen, make the call. You're gone. I need this man on. He's the future QB too.
Tanner freaking Mordecai.
Yo, as much as I'm concerned, he's the future QB too. Sign me up. You sold me on him. Holy smokes. The 40 time alone. I love
4.46. And if you watch him, he plays fast too. It's like he's looking to run it, and he's explosive. All
I
right.
might have to buy the Tanner Mordecai jersey you sold me so
Tanner
hard.
freaking Mordecai.
Let's get him. Let's get Morty on the roster. I hope he balls out in training camp and they get rid of Brandon Allen and we got Brock Purdy, Josh Dobbs, and Tanner Mordecai. I'm ready for it. Let's go.
Josh Dobbs, look over your shoulder. That's Tanner. Tanner Mordecai.
If Kirk was looking over his shoulder with Michael Penix, Josh Dobbs better be looking over his shoulder.
Josh Dobbs. Josh Dobbs. I saw Bears Vikings. You need to be looking over your shoulder.
Brock Purdy might need to be looking over that shoulder after you talk to him. Are you his agent? Holy smokes, Larry.
No, but his agent did follow me. I noticed this week on Twitter.
He's
all right, here's the question for you, Raj, because you're a monster on the IG. What blew up the most of all the stuff that you put out this weekend on the Raj extravaganza, the RSF 49ers?
What
blew up the most? And did you see the Evan Anderson flip into the swimming pool?
Oh, yeah, I posted that. That was my video I posted. I got it from his Instagram story. That was phenomenal. After I saw that, I was like,
how about that?
He is going to be a dog for this. I was like, wow, what a flip. Yeah, that was beautiful. I think the biggest thing that went off for me was there was 2 videos I posted before most folks. I posted the CJ Stroud reaction to the 49ers drafting Ricky Pearsall. That was fantastic. That was a great.
Isn't that interesting too? The contrast between some people who are like, the pick sucked, it was awful, it was this, it was that, and he's like, oh my God, I wanted that guy.
Yeah,
that was pretty revealing.
That was amazing. I was like, man, and I love CJ. I watched that, a lot of the content from that first night draft with him in part. Man, CJ Stroud is very well spoken. He's very humble. He's got a bright future, not just in the NFL. After the NFL, broadcasting, CJ Stroud, he is him. He is it. And then of course, the reaction video, Ricky Pearsall after he gets drafted, the react where he's hyped up, hugging the family. The reaction to Ricky Pearsall getting drafted that one went pretty big. Those 2 were like the big jewels of the whole draft. But I posted so much. There's probably other stuff that blew up, but those were probably the 2 biggest ones. But
Raj, I'll tell you one. Can I give you a hitter quitter? Since you always find ways to take this stuff, you ought to go get the Mason Pline dunking basketball. The Mason Pline dunking basketball video of his high school dunking and college. No, it's Ferris State footage.
Okay,
you could find it probably on YouTube, and because this guy is a high flyer dunker. And the Niners got him as an undrafted free agent tight end.
Yeah.
And he's got 10.5-inch hands. Woo. And he's a mechanical engineering major. So the guy's super smart. That might have been a sleeper pickup of the weekend.
I'd like to say
Mason Pline.
I was going to ask you because they've been desperately looking for a tight end too. Do you think Mason Pline? I thought, from Furman, the Paladin Powders. Do you think Mr. Mason Pline is going to be tight end 2?
Yes. Yeah, I do. Who's going to beat him?
Nobody.
Eric Saubert.
No, not Cam Latu.
Jake Tongues, Cam Latu. I love that. That was my favorite moment of the weekend when Shannon. So is Cam Latu your backup tight end? And our number 2 tight end, instead of just being like, he's in the running and, we're going to see how it goes. Shanahan's like, no,
he doesn't practice. He said
we don't actually give anybody jobs. He doesn't show up for work kind of a thing. It's like, dude, you might want to go to some of the meetings, bud. So, I don't know. Cam Latu, he'd better have a big turnaround or he's gonzo. And that was a 3rd-round draft choice.
Yeah, that man is so far in the doghouse. There's no way coming out because that was cold.
Was is he number 2? Oh, he could be. If he works hard. No, he's not number 2. He's not here. We haven't seen him yet.
He said straight up he needs to practice. I was like,
he needs to practice first. We don't even. That was just awesome. you get an indication of, well, that's a big part of football, man. It's like who's living at the facility, who wants to be good, who's willing to work at it, as opposed to just the guy who shows up and is like, hey, man, I'm pretty talented. All right, Raj. Good stuff. What do you got planned the rest of the week? What do you got cooking? Is there a story that's brewing that only Raj knows about?
Not this week. This week, Raj has to work a lot. So, we good. Last week was, I had to take some time off, make sure we were home for the draft. But this week, Larry, I got work and more work. So, and, I have my daughter this week. So nothing too crazy brewing, but, we'll be posting content as we need to.
And we got the one super here from, what is that?
Donkey Kong. He said, would have liked the center or left tackle / right tackle, but I like the players we got. Feels like Kyle has a quarterback he can really trust and wants to air it out on offense.
Yep. It does kind of, to me, when we see Jacob Cowing and Pearsall, Pearsall, I think, is going to be he's going to be like one of those guys where nobody really loves it on draft day because there's bigger, faster, more explosive wide receivers. But he's like, he's going to be so difficult to stop for opposing defenses on like 3rd and 5. And the way Purdy's so accurate and the way that guy runs routes, once they know each other and where they're going to be, those guys might be an unstoppable inside combination. So I know there are better physical guys out there, but still 42-inch vert is pretty damn good. And 4.41 speed is pretty good. So I feel good about him, but Cowing is the guy that I just love because he's just so fast, and to add a weapon like that to what you already have. Yeah. Think about that. The Niners now have a 4-3 slot receiver who has great hands. That's going to be that guy's going to be a very, very underrated player. He's small, but he's a small body, but he's not weak. Like if you watch him, he's like a tough little guy, wants a block, and he's gritty and great footwork. He's a little bit of a Tyreek. He's
kind of like a Ty Lockett kind of guy. He's just like, he's strong. He's like small. He's like buff, but he's small, but he's strong. You know what I mean?
That's a great call. He's like a stronger version of Ty Lockett, but he's like that kind of a route runner. He's like an elite route runner with great speed.
Yeah.
It's gonna be fun.
It's gonna be fun. I could already see Greg Papa say, "Holy cow, Jacob Cowing!" I could already hear it. And then
I was rooting for. That's a sack from Aurora, row.
We ain't getting
That's what I told Greg. I said, Greg, I want Rook Aurora just so you have to keep saying, yeah. As he's sacking the quarterback, he laughed.
He's going to say, "Holy cowing," something like that. And then Pretty Rick, Slicky, because his
Slick Rick is his
Slick
nickname.
Rick. He's got a lot of nicknames already. He's been on the team for less than a week. He's got about 10 nicknames. My favorite, though, is Yak Harlow. I don't know if you know who Jack Harlow is, but it's a play on Yak and Jack Harlow, the white rapper.
Right.
It's my favorite.
Okay, here we go. That was probably, I would say it's hard to grade drafts, but I think overall solid effort by the Niners, especially when we look back at the whole thing in its entirety, including the undrafted guys, because I think Schrader, Pline, and my guy Tanner Mordecai, I think are going to be good players.
I hope so.
There you go, Raj. Everybody you see, Krug says Tanner freaking Mordecai.
I'm gonna keep the receipt. I'm gonna when he balls out and he's tearing it up, I'm gonna remember Larry told me.
Yeah, you're going to say, hey, you know what? I heard it on the Krug show. All right, that does it for Raj. That does it for me. Have a great night, everybody. Pig in a pickle. Check out Underdog Fantasy. Our good friends at Sharp Corner Sports Cards and Collectibles and MarinAutoglass.com. For Raj, I'm Larry. Have a great night, everybody. Peace.
Yeah, never met a man I've been scared of. Careful.